So I want to take a look at the different draft prospects that have already met with the Packers. There are a few others that are apparently about to meet with the Packers based on differing reports. And I came across an article earlier today by Bill Huber of Sports Illustrated, and he shared all the different players who have met with the Packers and are about to meet with the Packers. So I want to go through those 7 different players right now. Of course, we're getting closer and closer to the draft, which will be at the end of this month. And we'll finally get to see who the Packers decide to bring to this roster, how they want to use their first few rounds, their first few picks. And if we look at these top 30 visits, which every NFL team has each season with these draft prospects, if we look back to the past 5 years, I came across some interesting information from Zach Kruse of Packers Wire, basically sharing how many of these players end up being on the Packers. And here's what he said. In 2018, the Packers drafted or eventually acquired 7 of the 30 players who visited. A year later, the Packers drafted or eventually acquired 6. Pre-draft visits were virtual and uncapped in 2020 and 2021. In 2022, the Packers drafted 6 of their top 30 visitors, including top picks Devontae Wyatt and Christian Watson. Last year, the Packers drafted or acquired 7 top 30 visitors, including day 3 hits Dontavian Wicks and Carl Brooks. So odds are some of these players who are brought in for these top 30 visits are going to be on the Packers based on recent history, likely around 6 or 7 different guys based on the past. And so if we start off here, first guy is Oklahoma offensive tackle Tyler Guyton. NFL Draft Buzz has his overall rank, which basically accumulates lots of different draft sites' rankings. They have him overall among all positions at 33.8, so almost a first rounder. He started 14 games in 2 seasons, all at right tackle. And here's what PFF had to say about him on their site, on their draft board, saying Guyton is a rare athlete for an offensive tackle. He is a former defensive end and didn't start playing offensive tackle until he got to college. That inexperience is still visible. His strike targets to defenders' bodies are inconsistent, as is his hand placement. This has caused him to be more of a pusher than a blocker. Still, his natural physical ability is evident. Guyton's foot speed and strength and stride length for a player of his size are impressive, allowing him to mirror without overextending. He can fire off the ball quickly, and that gives him a good punch at contact. I do think the Packers need to bolster this offensive line and their depth. I think that our starters are somewhat solidified. Maybe there's going to be some competition with Sean Rhyan at right guard, but there's no doubt the Packers need to draft probably 2 or 3 offensive linemen this draft to fill in the holes that have been lost by losing David Bakhtiari, John Runyan, Yosh Nijman. Then the next player, we have Texas A&M linebacker Edgerrin Cooper. NFL Draft Buzz overall average rank has him at 49.3. PFF says this: Cooper brings a lot of athleticism to the linebacker position. He possesses top-tier change of direction, burst, and pursuit speed. His best work comes when he keeps things in front of him, flying in for tackles at the line of scrimmage or toward the sidelines. Cooper's issues come from reacting more than anticipating. He is manipulated off his spot too often against play action and pre-snap motion. He also tends to over-pursue tackles, though he was more consistent in 2023. He earned a high coverage grade in 2023, but that was more from defending shallow zones, running backs out of the backfield, and QB scrambles than it was from deeper zone alignments. The Packers need to also bolster the depth at linebacker, moving to a 4-3, losing Devondre Campbell. The Packers have Isaiah McDuffie, Quay Walker, Eric Wilson, Christian Welch, and I think that McDuffie and Quay Walker will be 2 solid starters for the Packers, but I think that they need to get more depth here, and Edgerrin Cooper could potentially be one of those potential pieces. Then we have Ohio State defensive tackle Michael Hall Jr. NFL Draft Buzz has his overall average rank at 64, so basically the end of the second round. PFF says this: at 6'2", Hall is not long enough to be a 3-4, 4-3 defensive end, and at 280 pounds, he's not big enough to be a full-time defensive tackle. However, his play is quite productive. At his lower weight, speed and quickness are his calling cards. He loves to get across an offensive lineman's face to shoot a gap and get into the backfield. He does this either with a fast club arm over or by setting his blockers up with a Euro step before making a move. As a run defender, he is strong for his size, especially when he maintains a lower leverage, but inconsistent, too wide or too low. Hand placement negates that at times. And I think that you can never have enough defensive linemen. But I do think the Packers already have a good amount of depth at defensive tackle with Colby Wooding, Carl Brooks, Kenny Clark, TJ Slayton, Devontae Wyatt. Then we have Florida State cornerback Jarrian Jones NFL Draft Buzz has him at 117 overall. PFF says this: Jones transferred to Florida State after 1 year at Mississippi State, and he blossomed into an impact player. He was primarily an outside cornerback through the first 4 years of his college career, but his below-average long speed/recovery speed was exposed there, especially when asked to play in press. In 2023, he played in the slot and had a career year. He has the traits to succeed as a slot defender at the next level, boasting quick feet, hips, and acceleration to stick with players in space. He also brings great awareness of spacing and throwing paths, and he is consistently conscious of putting himself between the receiver and the ball. This offseason, the Packers did decide to bring back Keyshawn Nixon and Corey Ballantyne. With that being the case, I think that the need for cornerback isn't super high, even though it wouldn't be shocking if the Packers still drafted one somewhat early to potentially compete with Carrington Valentine and Eric Stokes, the opposite side of Jair Alexander. The Packers also, of course, bringing back Keyshawn Nixon on a 3-year deal. And so if Jarrian Jones came, it sounds like he's more of a slot player, at least last season. He could potentially maybe be a backup to Keyshawn Nixon, and they could sort of see if they could have something there. Then we have Northern Iowa defensive lineman Christian Boyd. NFL Draft Buzz's overall rank for him is 193.5. Bill Huber said this in his article: Boyd is a run-defending defensive lineman who threw up 38 reps on the bench press at Northern Iowa's Pro Day. He was a third-team FCS All-American in 2023 when he had 3.5 sacks and 6.5 tackles for losses. The 6'2", 329-pounder was one of the big scouting combine snubs. Then next, we have another linebacker in Kentucky linebacker Trevin Wallace. Average rank by NFL Draft Buzz, 145.5. This is also from Bill Huber. A day 3 prospect, Wallace's athleticism likely attracts the Packers to him as a potential running mate with Quay Walker. At 6'1" and 1/8 and 237 pounds, and with 4.51 speed in the 40, Wallace is one of the most athletic linebackers in the draft. In 2023, he had 5.5 sacks and 8.5 tackles for losses among 80 tackles. He had 3 interceptions during his final 2 seasons. So another linebacker that could potentially be added here as depth. And then finally, this is the last prospect, at least up to this point, is Michigan offensive lineman Zach Zinter. His overall rank per NFL Draft Buzz is 89.9. He played right guard in college. PFF says this: Zinter is a powerful interior offensive lineman whose skill set and size fit perfectly with Michigan's power running scheme. He carries a lot of weight in his upper half, giving him good power to push people at contact and latch on to maintain blocks. Despite his lack of weight in the lower half, he anchors well. He is a below-average athlete when it comes to movement and flexibility. His size is his best attribute in pass protection, but he is also patient as a pass blocker. And so now with John Runyon Jr. gone, Sean Rhyan seems like he's going to have a chance to take over fully there at right guard. But maybe the Packers add someone like Zinter who could potentially compete at right guard, and maybe at training camp we'll see some kind of competition there for potential starting right guard position for 2024. But those are the prospects so far that have met with the Packers or are about to, based on different reports here shared by Bill Huber, Source Illustrated. But if you'd like more Packers content, feel free to subscribe down below, and I'll see you guys next time.